Hi, my name is Annette Hur. I'm an artist living and working in Brooklyn. I moved to the US from South Korea in 2013, completely out of desperation, like a fish jumping out of a tank. Becoming an artist was the only way I could imagine in terms of starting over everything, not because it looked easy or anything, it just felt like a liberation to me because I always loved creating things. I really wanted to be free. To start somewhere, I needed to become more familiar with art history and contemporary art. I think the real influences I started finding were at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, where I went for my BFA. The museum, the Art Institute of Chicago, was in my backyard, and not to mention all the amazing faculty I met there. Then I was drawn to the stories of how artists have been speaking through so many different visual languages throughout history, and how it's never a separate thing from what we live for daily. Then I thought, this is it. I think I can do this. In Korea, studying art was not an option for me for many reasons. I was in the education field as a teacher, researcher, book developer, etc. But I didn't find enthusiasm or love for what I was doing for almost 6 years. And with all the personal traumas I was going through during those years, I had to find the courage to leave everything behind. And that was scary to leave everything behind. And so I needed some familiarity with language and culture, as everything else was extremely overwhelming and already mentally exhausting. I had to make the decision and act immediately. I was in a hurry. I had been in the US a couple times in my early 20s, and I have good memories from those times. So it was kind of that simple. I didn't have luxury to kind of research other opportunities and I believe it was a good, reasonable choice for me, and I don't regret it. The culture I grew up in South Korea tired me out completely by my mid 20s, and particularly the rotten patriarchy that had been happening around me was killing my core. And moving away from it meant A, running away, B, finding new ways to exist in this world, and C, starting to digest what's left in my stomach. The long-term unresolved traumas, emotional depth towards my family and friends and myself and everything. So in my earlier work, I used to talk a lot about my personal negative experiences I had in Korea and the new types of difficulties I faced in the United States, such as racism, Asian hatred, stigma, etc. It was a very natural way of transitioning from what I was or what I was expected to be to who I am and maybe who I wanted to be eventually. It has been over a decade of living in the United States, and the hidden narratives of my work have shifted from the process of transition and survival to the never-ending journey of a person who lives with multiple identities and places where you call home. In the beginning, painting was the most familiar medium, and I just simply thought I should start there. Over my school years, including grad school, I tried other mediums like sculpture, print media. The reason I'm still very focused on painting is that I'm undeniably obsessed with the process of highly intuitive flat image making and colors. What they create on a simple two-dimensional surface, a lot of times unexpectedly and more than I expected or even planned. I think oil painting truly unshackles me the way I want to be unshackled. Honestly, there isn't much of an elaborate process in my studio. I go to the studio, sit with whatever canvas I'm supposed to start or finish, and stare at my palette for a while. And then it comes to color mixing. Mixing colors honestly initiates everything. Each color I make gives me a certain thrill and like ideas of composition and also whatever moves I want to make with like certain brushes, etc. And the following process is purely intuitive and responsive. I a lot of times start on the floor with thin gamsily layers of paint, then put it up against the wall and make some moves and then repeat that process over and over until I finish the piece. Sometimes it takes a week, sometimes it takes more than a few months to reach the finished state. So there isn't one way or another to finish a painting. So in the beginning, I needed a protagonist that is kind of universally like relatable to my narratives for a while. But as I moved on to more abstract ways to communicate visually, I removed most of the recognizable figures like insects or animals and shifted my focus more to the space and the environment itself. So I can say it's arguably more about the landscape. I want to evoke the feeling of distance and fear of the unseeable times, whether it's the past or the future, and places, as well as the reflection of the passing of time and what's actually happening around us. Recently, I've been doing it through water, and it's been pretty effective for me. Simply when you are moving on from the past that was worse than the present, what drives you is little hope. That doesn't have to be very big. It can be something like, oh, this is great. I just want to keep doing this. I think complex and philosophical way of saying this is that conflict and resolutions mostly exist at the same time while we don't even know. It is hard for me to paint one or another. And especially when I speak about the bittersweet love-hate relationship with my country and my own culture that I grew up in, as well as the new challenges I face here in the States daily, trying to make small progress every day. I think that state of mind and layers of complexity naturally shows through the images I end up with. Removing the figurative elements, I chose water in nature to represent the ever-flowing psychological aspects of the journey of oneself. The water in nature circulates and never stops moving, transforming in this world, affecting and being affected constantly, reflecting what's above and also underneath. It's busy, but the calm horizon line deceives you of what's happening underneath or what's happening on the other side of the world even, and it gives you these beautiful reflections of lights and endless forms while reminding you that some things are very far and hard to reach and you can't have control over and even have to be left alone. I'm drawn to those limitless aspects of water and how it resembles our living experiences. In terms of communities in the art world, they form around you better when you actively seek for them. And because the process of making art isn't very far from like understanding others and other people's work as well. And you not just create art, but also actively engage in any dialogues that you can find around you. I once ran an artist-run space called Backyard Ghost in my home in Gowanus for a year during the pandemic, and it was great because I was really missing these human interactions, like dialogues with other artists for years and because of the pandemic, and it was a great opportunity to bring people back together and just, have limitless dialogues about the exhibitions or just about the life in general. But not just that type of like hard work, community creating work. You can just simply go to like friends' openings and invite people to your studio and just kind of actively create the opportunities that you can talk about life in general. And in the art world, I think there is some natural way, I would say maybe more organic way of uh, growing communities that's already existing. I'm excited about my studio and the new direction in my work these days. The studio has been a very fun, productive space over the summer, but I'm also very excited to go out and see more shows in the fall for more inspiration. I think just looking at art and meeting artists is always inspiring to me.